Did you see the second aircraft? Apparently it might have come in from the other direction.
No, I couldn't see it. I was looking at the building when it hit, and I saw my colleague Tim Lufkin and I saw it hit the building, but we did not see it fly into the building. We saw the explosion from it.
And again, I guess we're still trying to figure out, there are some reports that these planes were hijacked. The FBI is said to be investigating that. But the one that you saw appeared to be a small business jet?
Yes. And the second plane was obviously a larger plane because the explosion from the second plane was tenfold larger than the first plane.
Okay.
Now we have a no-fly zone all around the lower part of New York City and perhaps on the northern area too. All of the areas, airports closed down and armed American aircraft in the air to shoot down anybody else who wants to take a shot at the place.
I mean, those are the reports that are coming across the radio now, and if they're true, it's quite incredible and certainly unprecedented.
We also know that the FBI Rapid Response Team has been deployed. It is en route. Several FBI agents are already on the scene there at the Twin Towers, but they are definitely looking at this as a terrorist-related act, looking at this point not knowing who is behind it, but looking at the strong possibility that it may be Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the East African embassy bombings several years ago.
We're joined now on the telephone by the former Federal Emergency Management Agency Director James Lee Witt. Director Witt, you're watching these pictures with us this morning. Your comments?
Well, it's just horrible. There's no doubt. I did see the one plane flying into the building. It's just unbelievable, something like this. But, you know, we've been, for several years now, we've been working on terrorist-type events. And, you know, and this is apparently one of those events that I do not know yet, but apparently it could be. And right now I know I really feel for those families. But Richie and the New York Emergency Management, the state of New York, and I know they're very busy right now in the FBI and law enforcement, but this is one of those crisis management as well as a consequence management situation that they're going to have to be dealing with.
You know, the first thing this calls to mind to many of us who have been here to cover these events was the World Trade Center bombing back in, was it 96 when that bombing occurred?
Yes.
Bill, I know that Osama bin Laden likes airplanes, and again, we are not attributing this act to his organization, but he was implicated in a plot to blow up something like 13 airliners in 13 days, or 8 in 8 days, that back in the Philippines back in the 1980s, I believe.
Exactly.
Airplanes have been his terrorist weapon of choice in the past.
It sounded too low. I looked up, it looked too low, going in the wrong direction, and I followed it into the building.
Flew straight into the building?
Straight into the building, dead on. Disgusting sight.
After it hit, there was lots of debris that was falling on the ground, and there again, you're watching the plane.
And also, we just saw President Bush speaking. He called it, quote, an apparent terrorist attack on our country. And you're looking at that attack unfold before your very eyes.
Then you continued to look up at the building and you saw the second jet.
Well, then we were looking for about 5 minutes, just in horror at what happened, saw a second jet coming from the west that looked identical, both in color and in form, and it smashed right into the second building. Huge explosion on this side facing us.
Now we're all standing out, we're staring at the building, all of us, in horror.
Yeah. It's the only way to describe it. Horror, sadness, disgust.
The fact that you could take a plane and with just the number of people on the plane commit such a horrendous act at one time makes an impact to the world. Combine that with what we see in front of our eyes today at the World Trade Center, and you certainly conjure up the worst possible scenario that certainly law enforcement could think of what a terrorist might do. Before we get on to, possibly bin Laden, there are certainly other terrorist groups around the world that would like to do things like this. The question would be who might be able to actually carry out such an incident, whether by sheer manpower, training, or some other device. So although he's certainly our poster boy literally for terrorism worldwide, there are other groups out there that certainly have also ill intent against the United States.
You talked about fear and being scared.
What next?
Feelings of vulnerability.
Two huge planes crash into, the World Trade Center. what's going to happen next?
I'm going to interrupt myself and everybody else for a second because one of our senior producers, Mark Obenhaus, is on the phone, and he saw the incident. Mark, you hear me?
I do indeed, Peter.
Go ahead.
Well, I was leaving my house to go to work, and I walked down the street to go to the subway. I was at the corner of Franklin and West Broadway, and as I was approaching the subway, a tremendous roar went over my head, and I looked up immediately, and it was a plane, and much lower than I've ever seen a plane in Lower Manhattan. And it was a large plane. I couldn't identify it as anything specific except that it was a commercial jet, certainly. And then my eyes followed it because this is approximately 15 blocks from the World Trade Center, and it just slammed right into it and was completely engulfed by the building. It was extraordinary. No wings flew off, nothing like that. It just went directly in, creating this sort of cavern-like hole, and suddenly then big flames started protruding from it, and then of course smoke, and then debris started just catapulting.
I can also tell you that the first casualty has been brought into Beekman Downtown Hospital. It was a young man in his 20s. He came in with blood gushing out of his arm.
The first plane, which from my appearance, I saw it over Fifth Avenue heading south when I was coming to work, appeared to be a 737, or as I said, a smaller Airbus. That could fit with what Rita just reported, that her sources are saying that perhaps it was a plane hijacked from Boston, which obviously is north, that is a used air route down through Manhattan before planes make a left into LaGuardia, so clearly perhaps there may not have been an indication that something was wrong at that time.
I can tell you that witnesses are telling us that they have seen paper and pieces of office material flying through the air, drifting over Brooklyn about 3 miles from the tower. That happened after the first attack.
And then suddenly, from my vantage point, which would be north of the building, the far tower suddenly explodes in flames. Yet again, a similar kind of an event. And I now see, I've run down the street to my home where I have the television on, and I saw that too was another airplane. From our vantage point, you couldn't tell what exactly it was that hit the second tower, but it was a similar, seemingly almost like bomb blast, and with flames and debris protruding wildly from the building.
Okay, we're going to go to Harvey Kushner, who's a terrorism expert. Harvey, can you talk to us about what's going on? Obviously, President Bush coming out and saying that, and the FBI saying that they do believe that this is some sort of terrorist attack.
Well, when you have something as serious as this, people sometimes like to reserve judgment, but they must have some type of information which leads them to believe that this is in fact not an accident, but an act of terrorism. Because considering, if you look out your windows in the studio, if you can, look how clear it is. Look at the trade towers. One plane, possibly going off track, but not two. Yeah. So it seems from the scenario that people have witnessed, and from probably intelligence, the gathering sources, that this is a viable possibility.
Dr. Kushner, you were involved in the first attack. You worked.
I was not involved.
What about injuries, John? Can you tell us?
The most terrible and heartrending thing about this is, about 15 minutes ago, bodies started dropping from the top floors of the tower closest to the highway. About at least 5 or 6, and it was absolutely terrible. Obviously, they had two choices: to be burned in flames or to leap and end it all. It was quite tragic.
So these are people who apparently survived the initial explosion and fire and then found themselves engulfed in smoke.
Yes, and they obviously had no alternatives at that point.
As we continue our coverage, our Aaron Brown in New York City joining us now. Aaron, we can see over your left shoulder there the building still smoldering of the World Trade Center.
Well, it is a grotesque sight to look at from about 30 blocks away from where we are.
When we are looking at video of the second plane hitting the World Trade Center, when we saw it happen on live television, as we were talking about what at that point were only rumors of a plane hitting the first tower, then that second one came into view, and it became pretty clear what's going on here.
Laura, yeah, I'm on a payphone at the corner of Barclay and bear with me, I can't see too much, West Broadway, standing close, very close to FBI officers, NYPD, who are in touch with the command center and said they have an understanding and information, and I don't know if you've reported this because I've been unable to watch the coverage, that another plane is en route towards both towers. Officers left and right running by me away from the building. We're in a safe location, but as debris continues to fall from the buildings and flames shoot out the sides, they are on very much a high alert and just looking upwards to see what, if anything, is going to happen.
John, I guess you just heard the explosions. You didn't get a chance to see the planes involved.
No, I did not, but I looked up immediately afterwards, and of course the flames were everywhere. There's an enormous jagged hole in the first tower. The second hole in the second tower is much less extensive and much less dramatic, but there's flames out of that too, and of course there are flames burning in the parking lot across the street from the World Trade Center because of debris that has fallen down, and of course there's complete pandemonium here. And every building in the neighborhood is being evacuated or has been evacuated.
Yeah, that's the prudent thing to do, certainly.
Yeah, as I'm looking at the second tape right here, and I don't know if you're watching on the line with us, that is definitely a commercial-sized aircraft.
Yeah.
Now that we've blown it up.
Yeah.
In size.
You know, it's beyond belief, but it's not beyond belief. I mean, we've seen this hatred find its way into the embassy bombings in Africa. We've seen this hatred at the USS Cole. We've seen it at the World Trade Center in '93. We've seen it around the world in acts that take place almost every day. And, you know, for this to then transform itself into this size of an incredible tragedy, to me, although I certainly would never expect it, never ever want it to happen, is not that unbelievable.
We understand there is another plane heading for the World Trade Center, and there is a report that they may attempt to shoot it down.
Gotcha.
Continue to watch, stay on the line, tell us what your thoughts are right now.
Got it.
Have you had any contact at all with the governor's office? Because the Associated Press reporting that Governor Pataki in Manhattan today, that's what the office in Albany is apparently telling the Associated Press, although the staff not saying where the governor was at the time. Do we expect to hear from him, and do you know where he is?
We have reports, CNN has been told that one of the planes was an American Airlines 767 that had been hijacked from Boston. We don't know if that was the first or the second plane that hit the tower, but we do know that it was a 767 American Airlines jet. At least that's what CNN has been told by sources so far this morning. We also have reports of 1,000 injuries. That is unconfirmed, and we always remind you in moments like these that as these initial reports come in, it is very early. I can tell you, driving in, it is extraordinarily chaotic on the west side of New York. It is the kind of situation where numbers change, where situations change, but this is the information we have now.
Right now we have no reports on the number of people injured, on the number of people who are trying to be evacuated from other floors in the building. But what they're trying to do is keep as many people as possible out of Lower Manhattan so that you can get the emergency vehicles to the scene. You need fire trucks, you need as many ambulances as possible, and so you're going to need to keep as many people away from the scene as possible.
In Sarasota, Florida now, Major Garrett joins us. Major, what are you being told?
Hello. We have to find who did this, and any country, any nation in the world that is in any way involved and responsible, if it turns out to be terrorism, will require a response from the United States, and the United States has got to be willing to pay that price.
Mr. Johnson, obviously we were completely stunned when about 25 minutes after the first explosion, or after the first plane crashed into one of the Twin Towers.
It's absolutely just a horrible, horrible sight. It reminds you of the worst kind of effects in movies that, you know, you're reassured watching a movie that it's an effect, but this is not.